In 1977, pumping iron transformed how we saw bodybuilding. It turned Arnold Schwarzenegger from a muscle-bound curiosity into a chess master in posing trunks. It revealed the mind behind the mass, the strategy beneath the size. Nearly 50 years later, the documentary Lee Priest, Rebel with a Cause arrives with similar ambitions but delivers a different lesson. Where Pumping Iron showed us the art of playing the game, this film shows us what happens when someone refuses to play at all. Who is Lee Priest? Picture a 5'4" Aussie kid who looked like He-Man hate-fucked a pit bull, and whose resultant offspring discovered creatine. By his teens, this living action figure was making grown men contemplate career changes, while still dealing with high school bullies. Come the mid-90s, this Antipodean anomaly with cartoon hero arms that looked borrowed from a Transformer crash-landed in Venice Beach like a meteor made of fuck you. While his physique was a work of art, his personality was a Molotov cocktail. When everyone else was learning the IFBB's handbook of how to kiss ass and cup balls, Priest was using their rulebook as toilet paper. By the 2000s, he was bodybuilding Che Guevara, banned because he refused to play nice in the IFBB's steroid-laden sandbox. In a sport full of yes-men and bootlickers, here was a guy who would rather burn the whole fucking house down than pretend it wasn't already on fire. But there's a difference between fitting in and standing out. One gets you accepted, the other makes you remembered. There's a moment in this documentary where Priest stands next to Ronnie Coleman, the sport's eventual 8-time Mr. Olympia. Their height difference is almost comical. Coleman was everything the Federation wanted: massive, marketable, and obedient. Priest was everything they feared. Yet it's Priest who dominates the frame. Presence isn't measured in inches or pounds. Charisma doesn't follow the rules of mass and gravity. The Federation wanted giants. What they got was a giant killer who proved that you don't need to be bigger than the system. You just need to be bolder than its expectations. When it comes to criticism, the bodybuilding community is more sensitive than a tooth after a root canal. Try telling its true believers that their sport might have some problems, and they'll cry harder than a baby who dropped their ice cream cone. So how do you tell a story when the industry would prefer a fairy tale? Documentarians often find themselves tiptoeing around the real meat of the story, like vegans at a barbecue. The filmmakers navigate this minefield, choosing the path in between. The beautifully edited raw footage does the heavy lifting, while the narrative performs its careful dance. The truth is hidden in the Trojan horse of polished highlight reels, forced to sneak in while everyone watches the show. For the bodybuilding faithful, the story delivers as expected beats. Prodigy discovers power, champion faces giants, rebel chooses truth over comfort. For the uninitiated, it's an invitation to peek behind the curtain, offering enough context to follow the story's broader strokes. Yet the film effectively captures Priest's magnetic personality, while presenting a physical phenomenon that still strains credulity. Lee Priest wasn't just a bodybuilder who broke the mold, he refused to acknowledge the mold even existed. The sport wanted robots. Instead, it got a rebel. One who could be laid back and fierce, quiet and loud, champion and outsider, all at the same time. "I don't care about placings, I do this for myself and the fans," he'd say. Simple words carrying complex weight, a declaration of independence, or a shield against rejection. Maybe a bit of both. The maths of rebellion is never simple. Every no to conformity comes with a price tag. Every raised voice in protest echoes back as a closed door. Sometimes rebellion in a system built for sameness isn't a choice, it's oxygen. Sometimes standing out isn't about being different, it's about survival while staying whole. That's the paradox of authenticity. It doesn't fit in neat boxes. It doesn't follow the script. It just is. They called Priest the giant killer because of his height, misunderstanding its fundamental message about power. It captures the essence of how a small-town kid from nowhere refused to let physical size, social status, or institutional power determine his fate. The real giant wasn't the Federation, it was fear. Fear of speaking up, fear of standing out, fear of saying what everyone knew but nobody dared mention. And that's the giant he really fought to kill. Because sometimes the biggest statement isn't how tall you stand, but what you stand for. That's what makes a giant killer. Not the battles won, but the willingness to fight them in the first place. 20 years later, the stage looks different, but the script remains the same. Athletes still screwed on prize money, check. Politics still trump performance, check. And a federation acting like they're guarding nuclear codes instead of running a muscle show, double check. Nothing changes until something changes. Today's bodybuilding scene proves why we need Lee Priest. Social media gave everyone a megaphone, but the volume of resistance got turned down. Algorithms replaced guts and balls. Priest's echoes euthanized by filters and hashtags. Rebel yells became link in bio. Middle fingers became thumbs up emojis. Fuck the system became please like and subscribe. Priest told the IFBB to go fuck themselves and meant it. Now we've got influencers apologizing for using the wrong pronoun to describe their protein shakes. Maybe the question we should also be asking is, where are today's Lee Priests? Bodybuilding once had authentic characters. Today's Instagram cardboard cutouts all read from the same script. The documentary's assembled talking heads feel like a parade of convenient converts, gathered to praise the rebel they once shunned. The funny thing about history, everyone wants to rewrite their part once the dust settles. Yesterday's silent complicit enforcers become today's enlightened voices. But where were these same voices when the battles were being fought? When Priest stood alone in the trenches fighting not for placings but for principles, these same voices were nowhere to be found. Now they show up for the retro highlights, mistaking hindsight for heroism. Four-time Mr. Olympia and archetypal company man, the golden boy Jay Cutler, who wouldn't acknowledge Priest's existence, suddenly discovers his moral compass. This same Jay Cutler who tasted the system's bitter medicine with his failed diuretic test scandal, somehow missing the irony that Lee fought against that same system that once hung him out to dry. Dave Palumbo's miraculous transformation from scathing critic to cheerleader isn't fortuitous evolution, it's expedient economics. It turns out that rebellion and controversy sells better than conformity, especially when packaged in retrospective wisdom to prop up one's flagging YouTube channel. The real story sits in the empty chairs. Where's Wayne D'Amelia, the former IFBB patriarch whose complicated relationship with Priest could fill its own documentary? His absence speaks louder than any interview could. Or how about Lonnie Teeper or that list of absent friends, whose perspective might have added actual emotional depth, instead of the saccharine sweet commentary we receive. But that's the thing about rebels. They're rarely appreciated until that appreciation becomes profit, and any risk is in the rearview mirror. Icons aren't born in victory poses. They're forged in the fragments we choose to forget. The suicide attempt that doesn't make the final cut. The marriages that crumble under the weight of ambition. The teenage phenom trying to grow up while the world watches. When we tell stories about rebels, we often forget the rebellion lives inside first. The film gives us the shine but misses the shadows. The kind that makes a story worth telling. The kind that turns a sports biography into a lesson about the human spirit. What happens when you hand a 17-year-old kid the keys to the kingdom? When you tell him he's unstoppable right before life stops him cold? When fatherhood arrives by mail and some baby photos, while he's chasing dreams across oceans? We see the wins but never the private wars, the kind fought in quiet hotel rooms, in racing cars that offered escape, in moments between contests when the spotlight dims and the reality of mental health battles kick in. The real story isn't about being the shortest guy on the bodybuilding stage. It's about standing tall when the stage lights go off and the real battles begin. It's an irony that isn't lost. A documentary about bodybuilding's most unfiltered voice ends up applying its own filters, smoothing out the rough edges, brightening the dark corners, and cropping out the messy bits that make the story real. In trying to celebrate Priest's authenticity, it somehow manages to make the same mistake the IFBB did, trying to package him into something more marketable, more palatable, more manageable. By choosing the cleaner narrative, the film inadvertently does what Priest himself never would. It plays it safe. Like a competition tan, this film covers just enough to make things presentable. Like a perfect posing routine, it shows its best angles while keeping others hidden in shadow. While it's not the definitive Lee Priest story, that version would probably get everyone involved sued or murdered, it's still a damn entertaining watch for fans of the sport and the man. Some will say it's just a documentary, but that's missing the point. Because change doesn't start with acceptance, it starts with expectations, with demanding better, with refusing to settle for the story they want to tell instead of the story that needs telling. But maybe that's what it costs to tell this story at all. A glimpse of how bodybuilding still flinches when asked to look in the mirror. The question, who is Lee Priest, still lingers. Rebel, artist, provocateur, truth teller. The answer feels as elusive as ever, which is perhaps exactly as it should be. The answer, like Priest himself, defies categorization. In a sport full of puppets, Priest was the guy cutting his own strings, even if it meant at times falling flat on his face. The documentary might not show you all the scars, but at least it shows you that they were worth getting. Thanks for watching.